After Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, used her reality-warping mutant powers to wipe the X gene from existence, the mutant population was decimated and faced extinction, with only a few hundred mutants left in the entire world. The mutants needed a miracle to save their race, and that miracle came true just a few hours ago, when Professor X was nearly killed after Cerebra detected the birth of a new mutant somewhere in Alaska, in a small town called Cooperstown. This baby was the first new mutant since M-Day, and the X-Men rushed immediately to get to him and keep him safe, but they were too late. When they arrived, the small town was decimated, and almost all its people were killed. Cyclops thought that maybe the baby's mutant powers manifested somehow and caused all this destruction, but they soon found evidence proving otherwise. They found dead marauders, mutants that were part of Mr. Sinister's personal guard, but that's not all. The place was also crawling with dead purifiers. The Purifiers were an anti-mutant criminal organization that came here with the sole purpose of killing the newly born mutant. Emma Frost used her powers to read the mind of a female survivor, and saw that the Purifiers arrived here first and started killing every child on sight, but they were soon met by the Marauders, who came here to kidnap the baby. They quickly killed the Purifiers and seemingly left with the baby mutant. Before leaving, the X-Men visited the hospital and found the nursery in flames. The Purifiers had burned the place down, killing everyone in sight, including other babies. Just minutes after they left this place, a monster called Predator X arrived and ate the leftover bodies of the Marauders. Predator X was created in a laboratory with the sole purpose of hunting down mutants and killing them. Professor X visited Cyclops and said he was working on Cerebra, trying to get it back online, and asked him why he wasn't informed that a team was sent to Cooperstown. Cyclops reminded the professor that he doesn't need his permission to lead the X-Men, and blamed Xavier for leaving his brother out in space and doing nothing while his father was killed. Scott said he doesn't need Xavier's help and asked him to just focus on his work and bring Cerebra back online. The X-Men didn't waste any time and sprung into action, tracking down several members of the Acolytes, a mutant group created by Magneto who were friends with the Marauders and knew where Mr. Sinister was hiding. Cyclops thought of something and asked for help from Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man, Julio Richter, who lost his mutant powers and was just a normal man now, and Layla Miller, who is a seemingly normal girl with the power of knowledge. Even though Mr. Sinister probably has the baby, Cyclops wants Richter to infiltrate the Purifiers and find out what he can from them. The first part of the plan began in New York City, inside an abandoned church where the Purifiers were holding a secret meeting. Wolfsbane snuck inside and attacked the Purifiers, injuring several of them, and then ran outside. Richter was waiting outside and shot Wolfsbane several times in the chest, but she managed to get away in a car. This whole stunt was planned by Cyclops, and it was enough to trick the Purifiers into believing that Richter was on their side. Meanwhile, Madrox and Layla went to Dallas to see Forge and talk to him about the second part of the plan. Forge said that he was able to build a chronal tracer for time and space, and that after M-Day, all time branches involving mutants flatlined. However, ever since the birth of the missing child, 2 new branches have appeared, and he wanted Madrox to investigate them. Jamie created 2 copies of himself, one for each branch line, and sent the first one into the future. The second copy stepped on the platform and waited for the process to begin, but Layla ran towards him and hugged him tight, causing the machine to send both of them into the future. Forge said that there was no way to bring them back, because this trip to the future was only one way. After the clones gathered the intel from the future, they were instructed to kill themselves, and the knowledge would be transferred directly into Jamie's mind. But what happens to Layla? Out of nowhere, Madrox's eyes started rolling backwards, and he began to feel weak and fainted. Madrox and Layla successfully arrived 80 years into the future, in a world that had no mention of mutants, as if they never existed. They quickly found out that what was left of the mutant population was taken inside concentration camps and were treated as prisoners. Meanwhile, in New York City, Richter was being scanned by the Purifiers to make sure he wasn't a mutant, and he passed with flying colors. He was then accepted to join them and was shown a secret room filled with tons of weapons built to kill mutants. Somewhere in the Canadian mountains, one lonely mutant was making camp and using his heat breath to start the fire, but he wasn't alone. Predator X was hunting mutants, and it didn't take long to find him and kill him. Back at the X-Mansion, the new X-Men were mad at Cyclops for not including them in the mission against the Marauders, and decided to go after the Purifiers instead. Many of them hate the Purifiers after they killed many of their friends, and Surge suggested forming a group and attacking one of their bases. Over in Antarctica, Mr. Sinister told his Marauders to get ready because Cyclops sent the X-Men after them, and they need to be vigilant. He was right because the X-Men finally found them and made an entrance. While Wolverine said they were here for the baby and Rogue, who was being kept prisoner by Sinister. While this was going on, the new X-Men infiltrated the Purifier's base and started killing them one by one, but they were eventually greeted by Deathstrike, a highly skilled and deadly assassin. A brutal clash erupted between Deathstrike's Reavers and the new X-Men, and Santo jumped in front and asked everyone to get out of there while they still could, but he didn't move fast enough, and Deathstrike injured him. The mutants were quickly outnumbered and outmatched, but luckily Richter, who was posing as one of the Purifiers, stepped in to help them. Pixie was able to safely teleport away all of her teammates just moments before Deathstrike's claws would have torn them apart. The fight in Antarctica wasn't going any better either. The X-Men were only 5, and the Marauders were a lot more, but luckily they had Emma Frost on their side, who was psychically linked with all 5 of them from the X-Mansion. But this link was interrupted when Pixie teleported the new X-Men away from the Purifier's base, and Sinister locked her out for good. Wolverine overpowered Gambit and pinned him to the ground. He then threatened him to say where they were keeping the baby, but Gambit says it's not with them, someone else has it. Sinister and his henchmen managed to overpower even Colossus and pin him to the ground. That's when Storm asked Nightcrawler to find Wolverine and teleport everyone away from there while she dealt with the rest of the Marauders. Kurt was barely able to teleport Wolverine away, but they were safe for now, and Logan managed to tell Emma Frost that the baby was not there. One of them, an X-Man, took the baby from Cooperstown. Cable returned from the future with a single mission: to get the new baby mutant and keep her safe. After 2 bad news in a row, it was time for a third. That's when 2 giant sentinels that were guarding the X-Mansion attacked Cyclops and the other mutants inside the mansion. Emma was the first one to be taken out, while Bishop retaliated, giving Beast enough time to take her out of there. Someone had reprogrammed the sentinels and had them attack the mutants. The new X-Men, who barely made it out alive after they attacked the Purifiers, returned home and crashed their Blackbird directly into one of the sentinels. X-23 then jumped out of the plane directly onto its back, determined to finish the job, and sliced the robot into pieces using her claws. Cyclops asked Dust to infiltrate the Sentinel and find out what happened to the people that were inside, and found something disturbing. The 2 pilots were infected by nano-sentinels who took over their bodies completely and launched an attack on the mutants. X-23 surprised one of the nano-sentinels from behind and stuck her claws in its back, instantly killing it. The other sentinel, however, managed to escape, saying that mutants would be terminated in due time. The X-Men returned from Antarctica and were shocked to find the X-Mansion in ruins. They had no idea the place was under attack. Cyclops believed that his son, Cable, was behind the attack because only he could have had access to nano-sentinel technology from the future. He decided to send the X-Force after Cable, a special group created inside the X-Men with some of their deadliest and most skilled assassins. Meanwhile, somewhere in Canada, Cable was on the run with the baby strapped to his body, while Deathstrike and her team of Reavers were right behind him and managed to corner him. She claimed he and the baby would die here today and attacked Cable viciously, sticking her claws inside his arm as he tried to protect the baby. But luckily for him, the X-Force found them and immediately jumped to help Cable, dealing with the assassins. Wolverine tried to get to Cable, but Deathstrike got in the way. He said he didn't have time for her, but knew someone who was pissed at her and wanted to have a go. Logan left his daughter to fight, and he went after Cable, trying to get to the baby. Deathstrike felt insulted that Wolverine left a girl to fight in his place and brutally attacked X-23, but Laura refused to fight back and just stood and took the hits. But she wasn't stupid. She was taking her time and caught Deathstrike by surprise, cutting through her cybernetics. This left her almost paralyzed and unable to move, and X-23 said she was losing blood faster than her body could heal, and she cut her cybernetics faster than they could repair. She then stabbed her from behind, leaving a big hole inside her abdomen and instantly killing the assassin. Logan was chasing Cable down through the thick snow, but Cable was moving pretty fast for an old man. He was backtracking the same way the X-Men came and was able to reach the X-Men's Blackbird. He then hijacked the plane and left the X-Men stranded in the mountains. 80 years into the future, Multiple Man and Layla were captured by the police and taken to the mutant relocation camp as prisoners. Both of them had their heads shaved, and they were forced to take a cold shower while the guards watched. A doctor tattooed an M shape on their faces that contained a special virus to make sure they would never escape. In the present, Cable parked the Blackbird and carjacked a truck, driving it all the way to Dallas and trying to get to Forge. He went inside the building and went up the stairs, saying he didn't come here to hurt him. He just wanted to borrow some components. He found Forge lying on the ground unconscious, and Cable asked him who did this to him, but he was also shot in the back and dropped to the ground unconscious. Bishop was the one who shot him, but Cable was not his main target. He pointed his gun at the baby and prepared to kill it. The baby started crying, and Bishop said he didn't understand. He didn't want to do this, but he had no other choice. But before he could pull the trigger, the Marauders, led by Gambit himself, jumped him from the back. Gambit asked Malice to grab the child and keep it safe, while Bishop said it had to die. Sunfire grabbed Bishop from behind and burned his body, while Gambit said they were stopping him from killing a baby. He then charged a deck of cards and threw it at Bishop, sending him flying into the air. The Marauders were able to deal with Bishop, and Sunfire wanted to kill him, but Gambit said there was no time because the X-Men were almost there. When the X-Men arrived, Bishop told them that Cable took out Forge and stole his equipment, and when the Marauders came, they kidnapped the baby. The X-Men didn't have any reason to doubt Bishop and believed his story. The new mutants that were left behind at the X-Mansion were able to fix Cerebra, and they could now trace the Marauders and follow the baby. In the future, Madrox and Layla explored the mutant camp and found a young boy named Lucas Bishop, who had the same M shape tattooed on his face. They asked him what happened to this world, why the humans turned on the mutants and locked them up inside camps like these. Bishop said that everything started 80 years ago, when the mutant population was nearly extinct, and a new mutant messiah was born. Everything was going great until the mutant messiah killed 1 million people, which caused the humans to turn on the mutants. Bishop's family was locked inside this camp, and he was born a prisoner. He watched both of his parents die and blamed his miserable life on the mutant messiah. He knew that someone tried to kill the baby when it was born and wished they would have succeeded. Maybe his parents would still be alive. After finally hearing the truth and getting the information they needed, Layla strapped a grenade to Madrox's body, which instantly killed him. This caused the real Madrox in the present to wake up from his coma with all of the knowledge from his clone from the future and asked where Bishop was. After he lost the baby to the Marauders, Cable asked Professor X for help, and he came to fix his injuries. Cable said he was not responsible for the Sentinel attack on the X-Mansion and asked the professor to believe him. He said he saw the future, and it's darker than anyone could ever imagine. It nearly killed him, and the only one who can save everyone, mutants and humans, is this baby. The Marauders brought the baby to Muir Island, and Cable was trying to stop it from crying. They were greeted by Mr. Sinister, who was happy to see the baby, and told his mutants to get ready because the X-Men were on their way. Sinister took the baby and went inside a secret room, but it wasn't actually him. Mystique killed Mr. Sinister and disguised herself as him. She had other plans for the baby. Back at the X-Mansion, the new mutants were shocked to find out that they were not alone. The Predator X, who was created to hunt and kill mutants, had finally reached the mansion and attacked them. The X-Men used Cerebra to track down Gambit and followed him to Muir Island, but the Marauders were waiting for them and ambushed them. Wolverine told Wolfsbane to not hold back or they will die here, but Scalp Hunter shot Logan in the eye, and he fell down while his brains were splattered all over the floor. It didn't take long for him to recover, and he tried to get up, but Scrambler tried to slow down his healing factor. Luckily, his daughter interfered and cut Scrambler into tiny pieces, remarking that her father was healing too slowly. Mystique and Gambit brought the baby mutant to a room where her daughter Rogue was being kept in a coma. She wanted to help her daughter, and hoped that by absorbing the baby's powers, Rogue would eventually wake up. Mystique forced Rogue to kiss the baby, but this caused a powerful explosion that sent both of them against the wall. Luckily, the baby was alive and unharmed, but Rogue was still in a coma with no signs of waking up. Professor Xavier arrived and took the baby from them, and Gambit said he would stay where he belonged, at Rogue's side. The new X-Men were struggling against the Predator X, but one of them remembered that X-23 fought against one of these creatures and managed to kill it using her claws. Pixie offered to help and instantly teleported everyone from the mansion to Muir Island, including the Predator. They arrived exactly in the middle of the fight, leaving Cyclops in shock as to what just happened. Meanwhile, Professor X came out with the baby and gave it to Cable, telling him to take it and escape into the future. But before he could do anything, Bishop appeared and said he's not going anywhere and the child dies here. But they weren't alone. Predator X was close by, and Cable had to deal with two threats at once. Bishop tried to shoot Cable but hit the beast instead. It then jumped on him and tried to eat him alive. The brutal battle between the X-Men and the Marauders continued, with no clear winner in sight. Cyclops told Emma Frost to ask the students to join the fight and help them. The Marauders were trained to handle the X-Men, but they weren't prepared to handle the new generation of X-Men. In the middle of all the chaos, Cyclops found his son and asked him to hand over the baby, but he refused, saying it was in danger ever since it was born and wouldn't last a day here. The professor arrived and convinced Cable to trust his father, eventually giving him the baby. Meanwhile, Rogue was still in a coma with her mother crying by her side, but she eventually woke up. She had no idea where she was or what happened to her, but Mystique was just grateful she had finally woken up. However, Rogue was disgusted to find out that her mother used a mutant baby to absorb her powers. Rogue said that every time her mother tried to help, people got caught in between and ended up injured or even dead. Her mother couldn't keep doing this over and over and decided to do something about it. She removed her glove and touched her mother's face, wanting to kill her, saying she would always remember her and keep her in her heart. Mystique fell on the floor unconscious, but she wasn't dead. Somehow, touching the baby mutant did something to her and washed away her death touch. She decided to leave and asked Gambit not to follow her. She just wanted to be alone. The Marauders were slowly losing the fight, and the X-Men eliminated most of them, one by one. In the end, the X-Men were victorious, but they still had to deal with the Predator X threat, who was proving to be incredibly hard to kill. Wolverine climbed on top of a platform and then jumped inside the Predator's mouth, being swallowed alive. The X-Men attacked the Beast together, trying to help Logan and get him outside, but he didn't need any help. He used his claws to cut the Beast from inside, eventually emerging from its abdomen and spilling its guts on the floor. Cyclops held the baby in his arms, thinking it was a boy, but Cable corrected him, saying it's actually a girl and her name is Hope. Scott remembered how he had to abandon his son some time ago, when he sent Cable into the future to save his life after he was infected with the techno-organic virus. Now that most of the threats were eliminated, the X-Men gathered around to see the baby Messiah, and Cyclops decided to trust his son and give the baby girl back to him, telling him to take her out of here and let her be herself. Let her choose her own destiny and not be a strategic asset, used by or against the mutants. Cable agreed to keep her safe and said he would return to report back just as soon as he got settled somewhere. He activated his time machine and began to slowly fade away. But out of nowhere, Bishop got up and tried to shoot him and Hope, but Cable had already jumped and the shots hit someone else. Cyclops instantly reacted and blew Bishop away using a powerful energy blast. But sadly, the damage was already done. Professor X was caught in plain sight and unintentionally shot by Bishop. He dropped dead on the floor while the X-Men couldn't believe what just happened. The mutants asked Cyclops what they should do next, but the only thing he could think to say was, "Pray."
Pray that the child's birth means something, that we won't be the last, that there's still something good left in the world. It was Xavier's dream, wasn't it? It began with him, and it ends with him. There are no more X-Men.
Somewhere in the future, on the shores of San Francisco, a beam of energy began to form, and a temporal portal opened up.
Sun's coming up, kid. We made it. Now comes the hard part.
After Wanda Maximoff used her reality warping powers to completely destroy the mutant gene, the mutant population was decimated and faced extinction, with only 200 mutants left in the entire world. However, a miracle happened, and a new mutant baby girl named Hope was born in Cooperstown, a small town in Alaska. The town was quickly overrun by anti-mutant zealots who killed every baby in town trying to get the baby Messiah. Luckily, Cable came from the future and risked his life to save her, believing that she is the mutants' only hope of survival in a grim and hopeless future. Cyclops trusted his son and asked him to take her into the future to keep her safe and give her a better life than he was able to give him. But as soon as Cable arrived in the future, something went terribly wrong. His time machine broke and he couldn't travel back in time anymore, only into the future. Cable did his best to keep Hope safe and even settled down with a woman in the year 2276, but it didn't last long. Someone was always right behind them, trying to get to the girl and kill her. Bishop, who was a former X-Men member, believed that Hope is a harbinger of his future, a future where mutants are held in concentration camps, branded, and sent to the slaughter like animals. He truly believed that she would cause the end of the mutant race and turned against the X-Men and then tried to kill the girl. To find Cable and kill the girl, he teamed up with Strife, who is a clone of Cable but a lot stronger because his body was never infected with the techno-organic virus. At first, Strife didn't want to get involved, but Bishop said he knew where Apocalypse was, and he would help him kill him together. Apocalypse raised Strife as his own son, but he actually just used him his entire life, and only wanted to transfer his consciousness into his body. Strife despised him for this and wanted to kill Apocalypse, so he agreed to help Bishop. When Cable failed to return to the past, Cyclops knew that something went wrong. He and Beast were able to track his son in the future, so they sent the X-Force to find him and see what went wrong, why he never returned back into the past. The X-Force is a special team of assassins, consisting of some of the deadliest mutants in X-Men: Archangel, X-23, Domino, Wolverine, Warpath, Elixir, and Vanisher, who were all teleported to New York City in the year 2973. The city was mostly destroyed, and there were no people in sight, but they were not alone. Out of nowhere, a sniper shot Vanisher in the neck, and he dropped to the ground. The mutants took cover behind the rubble, but Deadpool appeared out of nowhere and surprised them, saying they looked kind of familiar. The X-Force couldn't believe it was actually him and asked what he was doing here. Vanisher was mad and asked Wolverine to kill him, but Logan had already stabbed him in the brain with his claws. They eventually teamed up and went searching for Cable, but Wolverine sniffed something in the air. He sprinted towards a target, but was greeted by a young girl with red hair and wearing a blue X-Men suit. He was caught off guard and forgot to watch his back and was ambushed by Cable, who put a gun to his head. Wolverine told him to ease up because they were there to help him, but Cable said he didn't need any help and asked Hope to grab his hand and wanted to leave. Logan tried to stop him, but he got punched in the face for it, while Cable said they walked right into a trap. He took them to the edge of the city and showed them something they couldn't believe was real. A celestial city that belongs to Strife, Cable's biggest enemy, who has been trying to kill him ever since he was born. The story jumps to another period in time when Cable and Hope were exploring the future together. In this future, things are not going well for humanity. The world was plagued by many nuclear wars that allowed cockroaches to mutate and become giant monsters that could fly. Cable joined the only human resistance left alive and offered his services in exchange for food, protection, and weapons. Because it was difficult to survive in the open, the scientists developed a bioweapon that theoretically could harm the genetics of the roach soldiers. And if it works, the roaches will be unable to move and within a few minutes die. But there is only one problem. There are very high chances that the same thing could happen to humans as well. Cable opposed this decision and told Hope they needed to leave this place. The resistance launched the attack on the roach soldiers, but Cable and Hope jumped again, this time 100 years into the future. As it turns out, Cable was right. The bioweapon worked and succeeded in killing the roaches, but it also had devastating effects on the humans, killing what was left of the surviving people. This future was nothing but a giant wasteland. There were no survivors, no food, and no water anywhere in sight. Cable told Hope that they just needed to travel further in time because nature always finds a way to come back. They just needed to go further. They jumped again, this time 1,000 years into the future, but this time things were even worse. The place looked even more abandoned, and there was nothing left but sand. Hope was curious and asked why they didn't just slide back home in the past, but Cable explained that his time machine was broken, and he didn't have any parts to fix it. Sadly, they were stuck in the future. They walked for days but couldn't find any signs of life. Eventually, it started raining, but before they could drink, they first needed to make sure the water was safe to drink. Sadly, even the water was contaminated, and drinking it would mean a painful death. They jumped another time, this time arriving right on top of a giant crater, probably caused by the impact of a giant asteroid. They both fell inside the crater, but something was wrong. Cable began to feel weak. He hadn't eaten anything for weeks and hadn't drunk any water in many days. He was saving every drop of water for Hope. Hope began to panic and tried to wake him up, but nothing worked. His body finally gave out. But Hope, just like Cable, was a survivor, and she spotted something sticking out from the sand. She dug deeper and found a giant ship hidden under all that dirt. First, she salvaged parts, just like Cable taught her to do, and then she went back to search for supplies. The crew was long dead and only their skeletons remained, and there were no signs of anything worth eating. She went deeper and found the ship's urine filtration unit, a machine that the crew used to filter urine and turn it into water. She took one of the tanks and took it outside to perform a test and see if the water was safe to drink. Luckily it was, and she gave some water to Cable, and he immediately woke up. Cable was proud of her and thought that maybe her mutant powers had developed, which allowed her to find the ship buried under all that sand. They continued their journey to Westchester, New York, and arrived at the former site of the X-Mansion. Cable hoped that maybe Cyclops left something here for them, just in case they ever needed it in the future, and he was right. They found a room filled with supplies, weapons, clothes, and some food that was long overdue. They also found something else, a digital recorder with an audio message left by his father.
Nathan, I'm leaving this in the one place you might think to look, Westchester, or what remains of it. It's been 8 weeks since you jumped into the time stream. We've discovered that Bishop has stolen a time machine from Forge to come after you and the baby. He won't stop until she's dead. I feel just as helpless as I did when I was forced to give you up all those years ago. Life is full of tragedies and death. You learn to deal with those, you learn to cope, but it's impossible to do the same when all you have are questions. And there's only one thing that can keep it from overwhelming you: faith. There's no one I have more faith in than you, Nathan. I trust that you know what's right, and that's what keeps me going. You're my son. That's all I need to know.
After taking everything they needed from the X-Mansion, Cable and Hope made another jump, this time arriving on the outskirts of Westchester in the year 2973, the same timeline where the X-Force arrived. But something was wrong. His time machine was not working anymore, and this place was far from being safe. Wolverine grabs Deadpool by the neck and demands some answers. He wants to know why they are here in the future, at the former home of Apocalypse and the current home of Strife. Wade says that everything began in the year 2034 when he was hired to smack down a rebellion led by some blonde chick with a big gun. However, he was quickly outmatched and had to run from them. He tried to hide inside an industrial freezer, thinking it would be a safe place. But there was a powerful explosion and the building came crashing down, trapping him inside the freezer. He was trapped there all along, and after many decades, he developed multiple personalities to keep himself entertained. He was trapped there for 800 years until a group of scavengers found him. They were hoping to find food and other supplies, but they found Deadpool barely alive. He got out and attacked them, but his healing factor wasn't what it used to be anymore. Out of nowhere, the scavengers looked extremely scared and quickly ran away. But it wasn't him they were afraid of. It was Strife. Cable says that's not possible. He watched Strife die with his own eyes, after his body disintegrated. Deadpool says that some kind of global catastrophe had wiped out most of the people on Earth, and his crazy brother stepped in to fill the void, enslaving the human race and transforming the world in his own image. Wade was left with no choice, so he joined him, but he eventually left, saying Strife was too ruthless even for him, making even the Age of Apocalypse seem nice in comparison. In his pursuit of finding Cable, Bishop traveled into the future and arrived in a time where most of the world was in ruins. He found some of the last few humans on Earth who told him about a sleeping god somewhere in the mountains. Bishop went to that location and found something shocking. Apocalypse was sleeping and regenerating his body inside a tomb. At the height of his power, Apocalypse ruled the world with an iron fist, but now he was weak and vulnerable, and Bishop offered to help Strife kill him together. Even so, killing Apocalypse took everything they had, but eventually, they succeeded in killing him, and Strife agreed to help Bishop. Wolverine confronted Cable, asking why he didn't notice all of this happening, how Strife took over the world, but Cable says he doesn't need to explain himself to him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a large group of drone soldiers were sent by Strife to attack them, and a brutal fight began. For the last couple of years, Cable was so focused on keeping Hope alive that he forgot he has enemies of his own, but this time, he wasn't alone. The X-Men were here to help him, but during the fight, Archangel hears something, a faint voice calling out to him from afar. He doesn't know who that is and flies away, heading in the direction of the voice. The mutants were able to fend off the attack and keep Hope alive, but they were still in danger. Strife flies towards them and attacks them head-on. He calls Cable old and weak, saying that killing him is almost meaningless, almost. Wolverine gives the order to kill Strife, but this was easier said than done. He quickly deals with Logan and Warpath, saying they are like mice trying to kill the cat. Cable jumps at him, calling him a mistake that never got corrected. He got close enough to attach a grenade to his body and detonates it. The explosion was powerful, but it didn't do much to hurt Strife. He was unharmed and continued his attack. He noticed that everyone was trying to keep Hope alive and is intrigued by this. So Strife grabs the girl and Warpath and then flies back to the city. Meanwhile, Archangel was following the voice in his head, which led him towards some abandoned caves. Inside, he finds a weak and injured Apocalypse. The fight with Bishop and Strife almost killed him, but he was still alive. He begs for his life and asks Archangel to bring him what he needs to restore him to his full strength, but Warren refuses to help him and leaves, saying he deserves to die for what he's done. The X-Men were beaten without even breaking a sweat, and Domino asks what they should do next. Cable says they need to charge the Citadel, take out Strife, and get Hope back. That's the plan. Strife trapped Hope inside a field of energy while Warpath was being tortured in the background. He doesn't understand why the girl is so special and tries to read her mind, but she looked normal. She wasn't even a mutant to him. Hope notices that Strife looks very much like Cable and thinks it's actually him in disguise. Bishop arrives and activates a special signal that weakens Strife, causing him to drop the force field. This leaves Hope vulnerable, and Bishop takes advantage of this and pulls out his gun, saying he will kill the girl before she kills the world. He pulls the trigger, but Strife recovers and uses his powers to stop the bullets, and then attacks Bishop. He doesn't understand why Bishop betrayed him, but he reads his mind and finally understands that he was trying to kill the girl all this time, and not Cable. While this was going on, Cable and the other X-Men were slowly advancing towards Strife's citadel, dealing with his drones one by one. Strife grabs Hope and says that Cable cares for her, but she is not his daughter, but she loves him like a father. She removes his mask, revealing his face, which prompted her to hug him, thinking he was Cable all this time. Warpath was able to free himself and attack Strife, telling him to get his hands off her. He punched him in the face, but it did very little to injure him, and he retaliated with a powerful blast of energy. This left Warpath unconscious on the ground, but Bishop surprised him from behind with a powerful hit, saying the girl isn't special, she is dead. Bishop grabs the girl and prepares to kill her, saying that many years ago he had the chance to kill her when she was just a baby, but he hesitated. He won't make the same mistake again. However, Strife noticed that Bishop was getting most of his energy from his bionic arm, so he used his powers to completely destroy his arm. He then asked Hope which one of his organs he should crush first. Bishop and Warpath were now both unconscious on the ground, and Strife sits on the throne holding Hope in his arms, but they weren't alone for long. Cable finally found them and he was pissed as hell, asking Strife to give him the girl. He was able to distract him long enough for Hope to run away, and it was now a fight to the death between Cable and his clone. Strife struck Cable with a powerful blast of energy, and he retaliated with many gunshots which destroyed a big part of his armor. But Cable wasn't alone. Wolverine joins the fight and attacks Strife from behind, dealing a powerful blow to his face. The other mutants also joined the fight, but Strife was just too powerful. He quickly deals with all of them, forcing Wolverine to stab himself in the face with his own claws. Back in the caves, Archangel returns to Apocalypse, saying that no matter how much he twisted him, there was still mercy deep within him. There was still humanity somewhere inside him. He brings Apocalypse something he needed to partially restore his body and his strength. Apocalypse recovers and says that sparing his life is a sign of weakness, but today they are both going to the same place to do the same thing. Strife grabs Cable by the throat and reads his mind, saying he was focused on the wrong thing all this time. He grabs the girl and takes her into another part of his citadel. Bishop eventually recovers and attacks Cable, but he wasn't the only one. Wolverine also wakes up, but he wasn't himself. His brain was still damaged, and he was in animal mode, reduced to his basic needs. Archangel brings Apocalypse to the Celestial City, and they go inside a secret room, a room where Apocalypse is able to feed on energy and restore himself to full glory. Bishop follows Strife and Hope to a giant room, claiming that Hope needs to die because she is a threat even for him, but he was still no match for the mighty mutant. Cable also arrives, and he wasn't alone. He brought Wolverine, who was still in animal rage. Strife was now fighting all three of them. He grabs Wolverine by the legs and uses his body to spin around and injure Cable, and then doing the same thing to Bishop. Cable talks to himself, forcing himself to keep going and not stop until the girl is safe. That's when Deadpool shows up, carrying a big-ass rocket launcher that shoots a giant blast of energy, enough to push Strife off the platform and fall into the void. Wolverine recovers while Hope hugs Cable, and Deadpool says that Strife is now dead. But that wasn't actually true because Strife could fly, and he returns even angrier. He grabs Deadpool and breaks his body in half, while he says this wasn't part of his severance plan for working for him all these years. The fight resumed, with the X-Men attacking Strife all at the same time, but it didn't matter what they did. He was just too powerful, and he quickly dealt with all of them simultaneously. But things were about to turn around when Archangel and Apocalypse both arrived, with Apocalypse saying Strife failed to kill, and failure is a weakness, so the weakness must be culled. Apocalypse was way beyond Strife's level, and quickly dealt with him, calling him a mistake, and saying he no longer has a place in this world and will die soon. Apocalypse says he was reborn from the DNA of his greatest horseman, and fueled by hate for allowing himself to even create Strife in the first place. Strife says he is sorry. He didn't mean to disobey his father, but Apocalypse says he is not his father. He is his executioner, and the age of Strife ends now. Somehow, Bishop was still alive, and he recovered once again. He pulls out his gun and wants to kill Hope at any cost, but Apocalypse grabs the girl and calls her special, saying he can feel her strength and deems her worthy of hosting his consciousness. He attacks Bishop with a blast of energy, calling him a frail creature for trying to destroy the future of the mutant species, and then kills him. Archangel says the girl is strong, but so is everyone around here, and they won't ask for mercy like he did back in the caves. He claims the girl because Apocalypse owes him a life for a life, and asks him to hand over the girl right now. Apocalypse agrees and gives him the girl as payment for saving his life. He vows to return again and claim the girl because he is infinite and has enough time to return when the girl is ready. He grabs Strife, who was barely alive, and takes him away, saying that today he will accomplish the greatest purpose he could have in life, to become his vessel of power and consciousness. After everything was done and settled, Logan asks Cable to take Hope and leave, go somewhere else and keep her safe, and the two of them jump again into another time stream once again. In the blink of an eye, the mutant species went from a population of 16 million to just 198. To make matters worse, the mutant gene had shut down, and years passed with no new mutant activations. Extinction was almost guaranteed, and the mutants' future was uncertain. Then, one morning, the impossible happened. A mutant baby was born. Her birth was greeted with carnage and death, but her salvation came in the form of the X-Man, Cable. Cable and the X-Men saved her from those who wanted to control or kill her, but Cyclops decided to send her into the future to keep her safe, with Cable as her protector. The future proved to be just as dangerous as the present, but Cable kept her safe and taught her to be a soldier like him. After 16 years in the future, she decided to come back. Her name is Hope Summers, and she returned with Cable to Westchester, New York, where the X-Mansion was located. But they didn't expect to find the place destroyed and abandoned. The X-Men were long gone, and there was nobody left to greet them. Hope found an old picture of the X-Men, and Cable said they were in the right timeline, but something must have happened because the place had been abandoned for months. But they were not alone. A group of armed drones attacked them out of nowhere, and Hope asked if Bishop was behind the attack. But it wasn't Bishop. These drones were sent by the Purifiers, an anti-mutant group of people who hate mutants and want to exterminate their race once and for all. The Purifiers had tried to kill Hope once before when she was born. They were the main reason she was sent into the future. Cable recognized the tech inside the drones and used it to cloak themselves just as Purifier reinforcements arrived. But the Purifiers were not the only ones who were informed of their arrival. The X-Men, who were now living on Utopia, a small island outside of San Francisco, one of the few cities in the country that still welcomed mutants, learned of it too. Cyclops summoned the team, and magic teleported everyone to the X-Mansion, but they were too late. They found only the remains of the robot drones, and no sign of Cable and Hope. The two time travelers were on the road, running from the Purifiers, who were slowly gaining on them. Luckily, the X-Men arrived and ambushed the Purifiers head-on, attacking all three cars that were in pursuit and giving Cable enough time to escape. Wolverine and his daughter, X-23, interrogated two of them and asked how they were tracking them. To make it more convincing, X-23 killed one of them in cold blood. The other zealot said he had no idea how they were tracking them. Someone else was sending them the locations. Over in Washington, D.C., at the Purifiers' main headquarters, William Stryker, Graydon Creed, and Cameron Hodge were reporting to Bastion what happened in Westchester. Bastion is a hybrid sentinel who came from the future, determined to kill Hope and wipe out the mutant population for good. Cable and the young girl went inside a mini-market to get some supplies, but Hope was distracted by all the shelves filled with products. She had spent most of her life in an apocalyptic future, scraping for food and other things to survive, while here, there was an abundance of everything. After leaving the mini-market, they found a motel by the side of the road and decided to spend the night there. Hope was overwhelmed with joy to find a soft bed and couldn't help herself from jumping up and down. Cable read a newspaper and found out that San Francisco is one of the few cities left in America that still welcomes mutants. He thought the X-Men might be located there and told Hope to get some sleep because they would leave early in the morning. But sadly, they weren't safe at all. Bastion said that because Cable is infected with the techno-organic virus, they were able to track him and know their exact location. He sent William Stryker and a squad of Purifiers after them and asked him to kill everyone and leave no survivors. Back in the mini-market, Cable caught Hope looking at beauty products and got something for her, a hairbrush. Hope appreciated the gesture and said the brush was for babies, but she did use a hairpin, although she wasn't sure if she used it correctly. Out of nowhere, the Purifiers arrived and surrounded the place, shutting down the power and even internet access. Luckily, the X-Men were heading toward them, and Cyclops said they were about 1.5 kilometers away. William Stryker ordered his goons to rush inside the room, but Cable blasted most of them away. He hit the fuel tank of a nearby truck, which caused a giant explosion, killing more Purifiers. It didn't take long for the X-Men to arrive, and Wolverine told Cable to take a deep breath, saying the good guys were there to save his ass again. While this was going on, another X-Men team was infiltrating a secret base where Cameron Hodge was preparing his army of over 100 armored Purifiers as a backup in case Stryker's attack failed. Logan asked Magic to take Hope out of there and keep her safe, but the Zealots were preparing to shoot them using a powerful cannon. Magic opened a portal and grabbed Hope's hand, but the cannon caused a giant explosion that made her lose her focus. This had devastating effects, as her connection with Limbo was still open, and many demonic creatures grabbed her and pulled her inside. Sadly, her brother Colossus couldn't do anything to save her. She was already gone. The rest of the X-Men were slowly winning the fight, killing Zealots left and right, which prompted Stryker to call for reinforcements. While everyone was distracted, Cable took the girl and ran away, saying that something was wrong. Cyclops ordered Cannonball to engage his team and attack the Zealots to prevent them from leaving to go and help Stryker, but Cannonball wasn't sure they could stop the attack without any casualties. The Beta team engaged the enemy and had the element of surprise, but Cameron was prepared for such an attack. Thanks to Bastion's advanced tech, he transformed into a scorpion-shaped robot and attacked the mutants. This robot was incredibly strong and fast, and on top of that, they still had to deal with the Zealots. Cannonball asked Karma to take control of Cameron's mind, but he was able to spot her and cut off one of her legs. The new mutants sprang into action to take Karma to safety and keep her alive, but it was pointless. The Zealots were just too many, and Cameron Hodge was too powerful. Cannonball asked Warlock to use his powers and help them, even though violence goes against his nature, saying that if he doesn't do anything, none of them will leave this place alive. Back in Utopia, Rogue told Cyclops that ever since Hope came back from the future, she felt a connection with her and needed to see her immediately. When Hope was just a baby, she brought Rogue back from a coma just by touching her, and this created a special bond between them. Cyclops agreed and asked Ariel to teleport Rogue as close as possible to Wolverine and his team. The two girls were reunited with the other X-Men, and from then on, Nightcrawler and Rogue scouted ahead, while Wolverine and the rest followed them. Rogue pointed Nightcrawler towards Hope, and the two of them jumped over 800 miles in just a few minutes. The other X-Men followed closely, but they were in grave danger without even knowing it. Bastion had sent a fighter jet to intercept them, which fired a rocket towards their cars. Even though Archangel was able to take down the fighter jet, the missile was on its way and reached its target, hitting Wolverine's car and completely destroying it. He and X-23 survived, but Ariel didn't make it. She died in the explosion. Logan said they couldn't stop now and needed to keep moving. Payback would come later. Back in the Purifier's base, Warlock decided to listen to Cannonball and join the fight. He was able to absorb the life of every Purifier inside the drones, and then went straight for Cameron, taking control of his mind and then breaking his head right off, instantly killing him. Cannonball reported back to Emma Frost and said they killed all the Purifiers and found out how Bastion was tracking Cable. Somewhere in Nebraska, Cable and Hope made camp inside an abandoned trailer park, but they weren't out of danger. Another group of Purifiers was able to find them and was preparing to shoot them down, but Wolverine and the other X-Men surprised them from behind. They quickly dealt with the Zealots, and Cable came outside to talk. Logan said that they were tracking the virus inside his body and knew exactly where he was at all times. After spending so many years together in the future, Cable decided to separate from Hope and send her with another team to Utopia, hopefully without being tracked this time. Wolverine told Rogue to take Hope and go with Nightcrawler, separating them into two teams. She absorbed his powers and others as well, including Archangel and Colossus, and became a beast of her own. Nightcrawler took the two girls and began his first jump towards San Francisco, while Wolverine asked if anyone knew any short prayers. After several jumps, they arrived in Las Vegas, Nevada, but the jumps took a lot out of Nightcrawler, and he needed a few minutes to catch his breath. Sadly, they didn't have any time to spare because someone attacked them, and Rogue told Hope to get behind her. Instead of sending more Purifiers, Bastion decided to send one of his drones after the girl. The drone tries to shoot Hope, but Nightcrawler jumps in the way and protects her. Rogue attacks and punches it in the face, completely destroying its head, and then uses her Wolverine claws to slice it up, but the drone recovers immediately and breaks them off. She jumps on him and pins him to the ground, but the drone powers up and shoots a blast of energy from its chest, powerful enough to send Rogue to the ground and leave her unconscious. Hope picks up a crowbar and tries to help her, but the drone is just too powerful and can instantly regenerate its body. He wants to kill the girl and goes for her throat, but Nightcrawler jumps between them, trying to teleport Hope away, but the drone's hand goes right through his chest as he is phasing out. With his last dying breath, Nightcrawler is able to safely teleport the girl all the way to Utopia, but the drone's hand is still lodged inside his chest, right through his heart. He gently dies away in her arms while saying that he believes in her. When Cyclops arrives, he has no idea what to expect, but he finds Hope on the ground next to Nightcrawler's lifeless body. Several hours later, the X-Men return to Utopia while Colossus says they need to go to Limbo right now and get his sister back, but Cyclops and Emma Frost await them with even more bad news. Wolverine couldn't believe that his friend was dead and was angrier than ever, while one of the mutants asks Hope to bring him back. Hope is confused, saying she doesn't understand. How could she bring him back? She can't do that. She can't do anything. She's a nobody. And then she starts running away. Cable goes after her and tries to console her, saying that he and she are both going to survive this. Nathan introduces her to Scott Summers, saying that Cyclops is his father. Meanwhile, somewhere inside the X-Men base, Donald Pierce, who was working for Bastion, reports back, saying that Cerebra and communications are down and asks what to do next. Bastion tells him to go to the hangar and sabotage their planes. He doesn't want the X-Men to leave the island at any cost. The X-Men gather and organize a small ceremony in Kurt's name, while each remembers precious moments spent together. Wolverine is barely holding together, saying that Kurt was the only guy who ever looked him in the eyes like a man and treated him like one. He was his best friend and never treated him like a damn animal. And now he's gone. And for what? He looks towards Cable and Hope and says she'd better be worth it. Cable brings Hope to the canteen and tells her to eat something because she hasn't slept in the last 24 hours and doesn't even know she is hungry. Moonstar says she wants to talk in private with Cable once he's put the girl to bed, but this triggers Hope, who confronts her. Moonstar is furious because her team was covering for them in the Purifier's base, dealing with Cameron Hodge and his drones, and it's not the first time they've done this for Cable. Hope punches her in the face and the two girls begin to fight. Food trays start flying while the girls jump at each other's throats, but Cyclops arrives and asks them to break it up. Cable stops his father and tells him to let them fight, saying that none of them are Hope's fathers and she needs to make her own decisions. Just as father and son were about to fight as well, a powerful explosion shook the entire compound. Donald Pierce was able to cause a massive explosion that destroyed all of the Blackbirds, saying he was sorry he won't be alive to witness the extinction of the mutant race. Namor grabs his hand and rips it right off, while Cyclops finishes him off with a powerful energy blast. But sadly, the damage was done, and the X-Men were now stuck on Utopia with no means of escaping. However, the worst was yet to come as the place suffers another attack, and the X-Men all rush outside to see what just happened. Everyone is shocked to see that the sky is painted in red, but they have no idea what just happened. A giant red sphere of energy has surrounded Utopia, the small island next to San Francisco, and home to some of the last mutants left alive in the entire world. Cyclops asks Iceman and Archangel to inspect the sphere and see if they can break it, but nothing seems to work, and Archangel says the sphere is harder than Diamond. Bastion says it's finally done. The containment area around the island is in place, and the X-Men are now trapped. The final phase of his attack can begin. The Avengers spring into action and come to San Francisco to help the X-Men, but even James Bradley, one of the brightest scientists in the world, doesn't know what this is, and just says it is indestructible. Thor doesn't like that word, and strikes the sphere using his hammer, but he doesn't even land a scratch. Not even Mjolnir can break it. As if this wasn't bad enough, out of nowhere, another smaller sphere appears in the middle of the Golden Gate Bridge. Iceman gets close to inspect it, when a hand reaches out and grabs him by the throat. It is Nimrod, an advanced sentinel created with the sole purpose of killing mutants. But it isn't alone. 5 Nimrods in total emerge from the sphere, all programmed to do one thing: kill the X-Men. One Nimrod is enough to put all of the mutants in danger, but 5 of them is a whole other level of threat. These sentinels are designed to analyze and adapt to individual mutants' powers and counteract their effects, making them extremely dangerous. Rogue still has all of the different powers from before and manages to kill one of them all by herself, while Namor does the same, punching a hole straight through one of their heads. The X-Men succeed in destroying all of the Nimrods, but not without casualties and injured people. Bastion comes from a future where humanity wins and all the mutants are wiped out. This sphere is a gateway to his future, and he is able to bring Nimrods to this timeline. The X-Men figure out that the sphere is directly connecting their timeline to a future timeline where the Nimrods originated from. Around 170,000 Nimrods are in contact with a central AI in the future, and are ready to be sent into the past if needed. Cyclops comes up with a plan and wants to send Cypher into the future timeline, using Cable's time machine, and take control of the central AI. Hopefully, he will be able to shut down all of the Nimrods before they get a chance to come here and kill everyone. To keep Cypher safe, Cyclops sends the X-Force, a special unit inside the X-Men, consisting of some of their deadliest members: Archangel, X-23, Wolverine, Domino, Cypher, and of course, Cable. Cable hugs Hope and says goodbye as he gets ready to jump again into an unknown future, but he is visibly saddened as if this was their final goodbye. After leaving, Cyclops tells everyone the truth. Cable only had one jump left in his time machine, and he knew it. They all knew it, but they still went anyway, even though they have no way of getting back. Hope is furious and jumps at him, cursing him for sending Cable on a suicide mission, but he had no other choice. He sent his own son to die. Meanwhile, outside of the giant red sphere, the Fantastic Four come to help, but even Reed Richards couldn't think of a solution. This thing is impenetrable. Inside the city, a second wave of Nimrods emerges and begins terrorizing the mutants and even the people. The X-Force arrives in the future and is greeted with a shocking sight. 2 giant Master Mold Sentinels are towering over the city, and thousands of Nimrods are lining up to be teleported into the past. They are greeted with a gruesome image, a wall filled with names of every mutant killed, including their own names. Archangel tears down this wall and X-23 says this doesn't change anything, But in order to prevent this future, they need to kill every single one of these Nimrods, and then get back into their own time and stop the same thing from happening there. Back in the past, Cyclops asks Professor X for help, saying he needs him to talk with his son, David Haller, also known as Legion, an Omega-level mutant who's also schizophrenic. They needed all the help they could get. Scott also asks Rogue to watch over Hope and keep her safe. She hates him at the moment, but she trusts Rogue. Legion is incredibly dangerous and unpredictable, but Charles talks to his son and says they need his help. David's multiple personalities each possess different mutant powers, making him a potential Omega-level mutant, but also very unpredictable. Rogue tells Hope that she was sent to keep an eye on her and make sure she doesn't get hurt, but the girl was trained by Cable to be a soldier and says she is done with letting other people die for her and wants to fight. The X-Men were slowly losing the fight against the Nimrods, who were coming in waves of 5 at a time and managed to surround Colossus. Legion accessed one of his personalities in the form of a metal-headed woman who could shoot incredibly strong energy blasts from her hands. Just one of these hits was powerful enough to destroy one of the Nimrods, but the others reprogrammed themselves to counteract his powers. So Legion used another personality, a drunk man with acidic breath, powerful enough to completely destroy another Nimrod. Legion gave the X-Men a much-needed break, allowing them to regroup and come to Colossus's aid. Meanwhile, the X-Force was slowly advancing towards the 2 Master Mold Sentinels, dealing with waves of people who were protecting the robots. Eventually, they came face to face with the Master Sentinels, but while one of them was in charge of producing Nimrods for the invasion, the other one was protecting it and got up, scaring even Wolverine. The X-Force split into 2 teams. While Wolverine, Archangel, X-23, and Domino stayed outside to fight the Guard Sentinel, Cable and Cypher went inside one of the buildings where Master Mold's processing core was located. Cypher connected himself to the machine and went inside the network, trying to take control of it and stop the attack. But the AI was adapting to everything Cypher was doing and slowly taking over his mind. In just a few moments, it completely took control over Cypher and wanted to assimilate him. But Cypher was much stronger than the AI and started to slowly reprogram it from the inside. Eventually, he returned and took control of it, just in time to save Cable from impending death. He was able to swiftly take out the second Master Mold that was outside and fighting the X-Force, causing it to crash to the ground. He then immediately took control of every Nimrod and took them offline, stopping the attack and saving the mutant race from extinction. Wolverine regrouped inside with Cable while X-23 tried to pass through the temporal sphere in hopes of returning to the past, but nothing organic could pass through, and it instantly burned her. They were pretty much stuck in this timeline, unless Cable had been infected with the techno-organic virus ever since he was just a baby, and had been fighting his entire life to keep it suppressed. But now, for the first time in his life, he decided to let it take over his body completely. Now part machine and part human, Cable passed through the temporal sphere and emerged in the past timeline, but it was taking a huge toll on his body. He made an opening large enough for the other X-Men to pass through, while Hope begged him to come back to her. Slowly, the mutants passed through the sphere. Domino took X-23 to the other side while she was unconscious from the previous attempt, followed by Archangel, Wolverine, and Cypher. Logan asked them to take Cypher, saying that he did it. He shut down the Nimrods, while Hope ran towards the sphere, trying to get to Cable. He saw her and smiled one last time, knowing that after all these years, she was finally safe with the X-Men. The sphere was finally closing, and it was too much for him to handle. His body disintegrated under the immense pressure, while Hope screamed his name in horror. Seeing his plan falling apart infuriated Bastion, who was watching everything from a distance. He said this changed nothing, and the girl must die, then flew away towards the Golden Gate Bridge to kill her himself. Hope remembered a conversation between her and Cable that had happened in the 31st century a while ago. She wanted to know when would be the right time to return to the past and face her destiny, and Cable told her she would know when the moment came because something would light inside her, like a fire. He knew this for sure because the same thing had happened to him the first time he held her in his arms, back in Cooperstown. After the sphere closed, there was nothing left of Cable. Only his robotic arm remained, which got separated from his body. Hope blamed Cyclops for everything and said she hated him, but they were not safe just yet. Bastion blasted a hole inside the bridge, causing it to break in half and split the X-Men. He said that survival was not an option, and that the mutant species ended here, with her, while Cyclops told her to run. Everyone told her to run, but she refused to move, saying that Cable was all she had. He was her whole life. Bastion powered up and shot a blast of energy towards her, but for the first time in her life, her mutant powers started to manifest. She was able to block his attack and retaliated with an energy blast directly from her eyes, just like Cyclops. This left Bastion crippled on his left side, and she rushed with a powerful hit through his chest. But Bastion regenerated his body and continued his attacks, saying her death was the reason for his existence, and they would never quit. She needed to die to ensure that humanity lived. Their fight raged on as Hope shot powerful blasts of energy directly from her eyes, but Bastion refused to give up. But Hope wasn't fighting alone. The X-Men were right behind her, and Cyclops shot Bastion, destroying his right arm. Wolverine then jumped on his back and began to slash his body, saying, "This is for Kurt." Hope powered up again, fueled by her feelings for Cable, creating a devastating energy blast that completely disintegrated Bastion and destroyed the giant sphere that surrounded Utopia. Professor Xavier and the X-Men gazed in shock as Hope slowly powered down after killing Bastion, but the final attack took a lot out of her, and she felt weak in the knees. She saw Cable's severed arm on the ground and dropped down to touch it, crying his name as she slowly fell asleep, hugging it just to feel close to him a bit longer. Now that the danger was over and Bastion was killed, everyone was taken to the infirmary, and Hope woke up 30 hours later. Beast was helping Colossus fix his broken arm, but it was easier said than done because he needed a lot of force to set his bone back into position. She didn't remember what she did, but Magneto, who was also recovering next to her, told her that she killed Bastion all by herself. She was worried that the other X-Men might think she was dangerous now, but Magneto said that sometimes it's quite beneficial to be thought of as dangerous. Hope had another flashback to something that happened in the future when they were almost ambushed by a group of scavengers. Cable was almost shot and killed, and Hope was worried about losing him. She couldn't bear the thought of wandering the deserts in this future all by herself, but Cable comforted her and said that was not going to happen. She wasn't getting rid of him that easily. The next day, the X-Men buried their dead, and everyone attended Cable's funeral, but Cyclops couldn't bear to finish his speech and began to cry. Hope took the lead and said that her father, Nathan Christopher Summers, was born into battle, and his life was a war. All the time she knew him, he slept in 10-minute stretches, ate with his back to a wall, and never sat still long enough to become an easy target. She said that Cable got an honorable death for a soldier, and that nobody needed to cry for him. Storm visited Wolverine in his room, where he was mourning Nightcrawler's death by drinking lots of beer, but it's hard for someone who can't get drunk. She was disappointed in him for joining the X-Force. Even though Cyclops took most of the blame for that, she knew that Wolverine joined willingly, but the X-Men don't kill, and Logan had a lot of blood on his hands. Logan talked to X-23 and told her she was out of the X-Force. He and Cyclops both convinced her to join because she was a valuable asset, but he wanted her to make her own decisions. She didn't know what to do or what she wanted and wanted someone to tell her, but Logan said that was a start. Next, he talked to Cyclops, who said that he had a lot of blood on his hands, and maybe Captain America and the other Avengers would knock on his door to arrest him if they ever found out what the X-Force did. But he would go to prison smiling, knowing that everything he did was for the survival of the mutant race, and he would gladly do it all over again. One evening, the mutants were gathered around a giant campfire, but Emma Frost saw something in the fire behind Hope. It was the Phoenix Force. She immediately ran to tell Cyclops what she saw, but he was watching something in the control room. Out of nowhere, the screen started to light up with hundreds of new mutant births all over the Earth. New mutants were being born again after all this time, and Cyclops said they were right all along.